Good evening. My name is...
Jack, chronicler of the Northlands.
Or the Lost Scholar. Thank you, Delver. I did say I'd clip that. You should not have trusted me with it. Race. Race is a very charged word nowadays. But since the inception of the fantasy genre, race has been used to refer to men, elves, dwarves, orcs, and the like. And now instead, we have species. Something that feels, to me, ever so much more sci-fi. Now, if you'll forgive me my self-indulgence, last year I wrote an article entitled Musings, The Necessity of Evil Races in Fantasy and the Experiences of Drizzt Do'Urden. It's still quite popular, it's one I'm quite proud of, and I'm going to quote myself. It is quite obvious to myself that this is politically motivated and an attempt to move away from the language of race. I believe the more sci-fi term of species is now substituted. This is understandable, I suppose. No corporation wants to be slapped with the racist label. Yet it does open a larger dialogue on the genre as a whole. Wizards of the Coast knows what it's doing here. Jeremy Crawford went on Pointy Hat's channel and tried to explain away the decision to move away from race to species as a sort of mechanical explanatory decision, as if people don't understand after 50 years of Dungeons & Dragons what we mean when we say race. We mean elves, dwarves, orcs, and the like. Hell, it's self-evident to me that this is simply a way of moving away from a very charged term, one that has no business being charged in genre fantasy, as the grandfather of the genre, Tolkien, used the term race quite liberally. Indeed, they say it's not scientifically accurate. Fantasy doesn't have to be entirely scientifically accurate. When we use the word race, we know what it means in the context of the genre. We've been reading these books now for nearly 100 years. I think 1930s is probably where I would place modern fantasy's beginnings. Do we really need to be treated like children and told that it's not race anymore, it's species? You idiots. Because you don't understand. Oh boy. And now that we're somewhere in the midpoint of the video, it behooves me to tell you to like and subscribe. Please, and perhaps follow me on X/Twitter and read my blog, and eventually buy my books. You should do that. It is quite telling, actually, to have the Scientific American come up with this headline: Dungeons & Dragons is shedding race in gaming, here's why it matters. The nerd culture powerhouse is rebranding its elves, dwarves, spelled dwarves wrong, and orcs, previously referred to as races, are moving towards the use of the term species. And the article itself goes on to discuss biological essentialism and this phony social science type stuff, where actually all they're doing is taking a grand moral stance against the grandfathers of the hobby and the master Tolkien himself, trying to virtue signal by standing on the graves of those that came before and made better stuff than they did. Now, I wouldn't find any of this so objectionable if they were simply upfront with their reasoning. I mean, Crawford, in his interview with Pointy Hat, referred to race as that other term, as if it was somehow out of the ordinary for authors throughout the last 50 years of modern fantasy to be using the word race in regards to orcs, elves, dwarves, humans, and other such fantastical creatures. Species has an entirely different flavour. Species is sci-fi. I create species when I play Stellaris, or when I watch, or I like species when I'm watching Star Trek, because the word has an entirely different connotation in the realms of fiction. If you're writing contemporary fiction, like To Kill a Mockingbird, you know that race means how we understand race in the modern world today. It means the colour of one's skin, their phenotype. If you're reading The Lord of the Rings, you know the race of men are the humans, you know the elves are elves, and the race of dwarves are dwarves. If you're watching Star Trek, you know when they say species, they mean Klingons, or they mean humans or Vulcans. There are entirely different sets of reasons to be using these words in the way we use them. Context matters, and this hidden implication that anyone that would use the word race is in some way racist when talking about and being within genre fantasy is quite immoral, at least in my humble opinion. Thankfully, most people seem to just default to race still, rather than have this Orwellian newspeak foisted upon them. It does make me wonder, though, why so many of the large dungeon tubers have so readily switched from race to species by what is equivalent, in my opinion, to a government fiat. Oh well, I suppose we shall never know. I, for one, hold no ill will to anyone for using either term at their table. For me, it shall remain as it has been for the last 100 or so years. The race of men, the race of elves, and so on and so forth. Do please like, comment, and subscribe, and go over and follow me on X/Twitter. I'd very much appreciate it. Share the video. Thank you, and good night.